Good morning, Glenn. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing finer than frog hair split 3 times. Give that a little bit of thought there, man. That is pretty doggone fine.
I'll think about that later.
There we go.
Ponder that.
So, there's a lot of disruption going on right now in the automotive industry from the corporate side, and we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Manufacturer
side, and how in the world is that going to affect you and me as shop owners and the consumers who are purchasing and driving these vehicles and needing them serviced?
Right, and every 4 years, they kind of go through this to where they do a renegotiation with the union, and they try to
get more money.
Yeah, and more benefits and more
money,
more compensation kind of thing. And on September 14th at midnight is the deadline. And so if this thing goes south, this could be really bad. The company out there, and you and I learned something here just before we got on this podcast, that there's a company called Stellantis. And, they actually own Chrysler, they own Jeep, they own Fiat, they own Peugeot, and a few other companies too. And Dodge. Yeah, Dodge. I left Dodge off. And so
Maserati, there's a bunch of them in there.
Yeah,
I mean, there's like 14 car manufacturers that are owned by this company, which I was totally unaware of.
Me too. I
knew that Fiat had bought Dodge a few years ago, and Chrysler and Jeep, but I didn't realize that Stellantis now owns Fiat and everybody else in that list.
Yeah, when our producer went ahead and asked us about Stellantis, you and I looked at each other and go, what the heck is she talking about?
Are we talking stalagmites or stalactites, or what are we talking about
here?
No
idea. So, and then Ford and GM, what they do every 4 years is that one of the companies decides that, they negotiate the best deal that they possibly can, and then the other two, Ford and GM, will kind of go along with the whole thing.
Right. Well, the deal is, because this is a foreign-owned entity, the Stallantis company, they're dealing mostly with European brands for the most part. And when Fiat bought Chrysler from Daimler, which was another European company which owns Mercedes-Benz and Audi and Volkswagen, and some others, maybe Land Rover or something like that. But at any rate, when these conglomerates get so big, their employees figure, well, they're making a boatload of money, so, we want to make sure that we're getting raises and benefits that are consistent with the economy of the business itself. And the biggest problem that we're having right now is with microchips. We're back again with microchip issues, and you mentioned you had
one of my customers, he had a friend, he bought a brand new truck, and the heated seats didn't work, and there was a couple other little accessories inside the vehicle that didn't work because they don't have the chips. They're just getting the cars running, getting them on the road, but there's some accessories that need those chips.
Yeah. Our apologies, but all those doodad add-ons aren't going to be working on your vehicle until we have enough microchips, and then at that point they're going to have to install another computer in the thing and then program it so that all those accessories work again. So it's
well, and what do you think that's going to do if these guys go on strike?
Well, they're talking about asking for a 48% raise. Now, if any of my employees came to me and says, "Hey, boss, I need a 48% raise in order to stay current with inflation and all the things that have happened to our economy in the last few years," I tell them I can't help you. I can't even come close to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a big raise. Well, and the bottom line is every time they get a raise or they get more benefits, obviously the consumer's going to pay more because it all flows downhill.
And granted, one of the caveats is that this happens over a period of 4 years. It's not 48% tomorrow or when they close the negotiations, but over a period of 4 years, you're going to be looking at 48%, which is about 12% cost of employment costs to these corporations over the next 4 years. And so what is that going to do to the auto climate and the economy of purchasing an automobile?
Right. And
if it's 12% to them, it's going to be 40 or 50% to the consumer.
Right. And UAW, which is the United Auto Workers, that's the union.
Right.
And it looks like, from what I've read and what I understand, and I'm not, I could be wrong, but it looks to me like the Stellantis group is gonna be the first to go on strike. And then who knows, maybe Ford and GM will follow suit if they can't work out a deal and they can't hammer it out. But they've got to figure out a way to hammer this thing out, because if they don't, they're going to lose billions of dollars in the first 10 days they're losing so many billions of dollars, $5 billion, and that's a lot of money. For 10 days, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And not to mention what the back.
I can't even fathom
Well,
$5 billion, let alone losing it in every 10 days.
Right, and the backlog, and now try to get caught up from that, because once the production stops, getting production back up and running again and getting it going, it's gonna create a backlog, and it's gonna hurt the consumer. There's no doubt about it. And a lot of these manufacturers are going to robotics, so they're cutting out workers
As fast as they can.
You had mentioned that GM was laying off some IT people, right?
Yes, just here in our valley. What was the total of workers that were lost or that they laid off? It was, I think, it was over 900. I think it was 926 workers here out of their IT department were dismissed from their jobs, or will be shortly.
And you look at AI, look at all the things that are going on with IT stuff. You just wonder how that's going to affect that industry. It's going to probably affect it a lot.
Well, it's going to leave a lot of people unemployed, and as those AI jobs and stuff, or AI systems take over the technology world, more and more people are going to be looking for work, and they've got job skills that are very specific to what
Absolutely,
they do.
yep.
You can't take an AI guy, an IT guy, and suddenly just, make him into a plumber or
in this
electrician or something. I mean, it's a completely different field, and it's much more technologically based in many aspects.
Yeah, there was a guy that was in the tech world, in the IT world, and he's very well off, and he had mentioned that kids nowadays there's a lot of kids going to school right now for jobs that aren't going to be around in 5 years.
Yeah.
And that's the scary part right there, because you mentioned it, that it's a lot of these jobs are very specific,
Yes.
and they don't have any other skills. So the thing of it is once they lose that job, and they're high-paying jobs, so you lose a high-paying job like that, to replace that job is not going to be easy.
Yeah, that's what we call in general, it's called the paradigm shift,
Yeah.
where something major takes place, a new technology or a new way of doing something comes over into our world, and all of a sudden people are losing their jobs by the hundreds of thousands, in our country and worldwide, maybe into the millions of people who were once working in an industry, but because of this paradigm shift where the technology is completely changing over, and like you said, AI is such a big proponent of this takeover in terms of, them developing, artificial intelligence is what AI is. It can't necessarily control everything, but they're trying to design it so that it kind of does.
Right, and you look at you talked about the technology. Look at the EV cars out there right now. They don't need as many parts. It's easier to manufacture. It's easier to use robotics to put them together because there isn't as many parts.
Yeah, but it's expensive as hell.
It is expensive as hell, yes.
And that's the problem, is that a lot of people can't go out there and afford to buy one of these $80, $90, $120, $200,000 vehicles because, hey, they just lost their job in IT. They don't have the money anymore to do it. So what are you going to do? Finance your car for 50 years now? Or I mean, what is it going to take to make this whole thing work? And that's something that the people who are at the top of these industries, they really don't care because they're going to get their money regardless, right? But they're forcing people to do things. I mean, the prices of housing is ridiculous everywhere,
Yeah, well, just inflation overall has really gone through the roof. And I think the union, when you're looking at the UAW, they're looking at it from a standpoint of these EVs might threaten their jobs if production on the gasoline engines or, the petroleum vehicles decreases at a rapid rate. They're going to end up laying a bunch of those people off too.
Right, and I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, but there's 150,000 members of the UAW, the United Auto Workers, and I'm not even sure if that includes these people from Stallantis because they're not in the United States, they're operating out of Europe. So I don't know if they're part of the United Auto Workers Union anymore, if Chrysler and all those people
Well, they
are.
They
still have plants here who are manufacturing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they do. They have plants here, and they are part of it. That's why they're probably going to be the first ones to strike, and that's here in the United States.
Well, they can flex their muscles because of the amount of vehicles that they manufacture worldwide, as opposed to Like if you go to Europe, you don't see a lot of Fords, you don't see a lot of GMs, you don't see a lot of. Now you're seeing probably a lot more Chrysler products, but they're much more widespread because they include Fiat and many of the other brands that.
Well, yeah, they're big.
this company
They're really big
owns.
companies, but I mean the UAW is really I think they're really looking at the long term of basically their industry.
Right. So when that all trickles down to you and me who own auto repair shops, how is that going to impact what we're doing?
Right. Well, and it just depends on how the EVs really evolve. I'll be honest with you. I don't think EVs are 100% of the solution that we're trying to get to. We're still digging stuff out of the ground to make batteries.
Well,
We're still,
yeah,
we've
well,
got a
and-
disposal problem. We've got a fire hazard problem. There's a lot of issues there, and we got to work through
And
it.
most of those minerals aren't mined in our country. That's another problem. So we're supporting someone else's economy to do something that they're pushing in our economy for everyone to have. And the reality is only just over 2% of vehicles right now are full electric vehicles in this country.
Well, and even Elon Musk said, and he's the owner of Tesla, and he said EVs are not the whole solution. It's part of the solution. It's just not the whole solution. And I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of petroleum operated vehicles. I just don't see it. And I know they're working on hydrogen now. Hydrogen's another thing they're trying to see if that is a part of the solution. But I think all of those things are going to have to be part of that solution.
Yeah, they've been dabbling in that since my brother worked for a Ford dealership here, and they were doing hydrogen car development with Ford about 20 years ago.
Right, and let's get back on the topic of the UAW and the strike that's going to happen and what that's going to impact. I mean, think about parts, and think about everybody that works with the UAW, the manufacturing side of it, the
Right.
steel workers. They get all of these
Raw materials.
Raw materials, good word.
Yeah,
Raw materials
aluminum.
that they get, and they
Copper.
and all of those people that are supplying them with the raw materials. What is that going to do to them? I mean, it could bankrupt them if this thing goes on for a long period of time. It could hurt them.
Yeah. Well, and the same goes for, there's only so many vehicles that are available, whether they be new or used or whatever. But if the new car, industry suffers, a big loss in revenue or a loss in manufacturing in terms of manufacturing less cars because they don't have A, the microchips, B, the personnel, and down the food chain, we're going to have a crisis here with people trying to find even good, affordable used cars, right?
Right, and you kind of alluded to it. It's the cost. The cost to the consumer is where they're going to pay, and also time. Right now, we have parts that we have to order, and usually we can get them in a day. Have the car back on the road. Sometimes it's take 2, 3, 4 a week to get parts.
Even several weeks, because if
Yeah.
it's a computer for a vehicle, again, there's a drastic shortage right now of computers for vehicles. And these computers that they're building, I'm sorry, but they have a very high failure rate as compared to even the antiquated ones from the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. They're not being made as reliable. They don't last for the life of the car. Some of them are 3 or 4 years old and they fail. And now there's a big demand for them, and you can't get them because no one has any to sell you, or the dealers are hoarding them to themselves. They're not willing to sell to an independent shop because they know that they're going to need them themselves to keep their business flowing and flourishing.
Right, absolutely. And who's going to be able to, if cars, the manufacturing side of it stops, and there's less cars out there, which there is right now anyway, but I mean, let's say there's even less cars out there, the prices are just going to keep going up. And then who's going to be able to afford to buy it? And people are just going to have to hang on. And this is why you and I preach this all the time. Maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. Take care of your car, because when you get yourself in a situation where you're thinking, I'm going to get rid of the car at the end of the year, and then all of a sudden at the end of the year you go to look at prices and figure out that there's no way in the world I'm going to pay this, or I can't afford it, and now you got a car that you've abused for a whole year. You've got to keep the maintenance up on your car until the day you sell it, because you want to make sure that if you don't end up selling it and you do end up needing to keep the car, that the car will still get you safely and reliably to where you need to go.
Right, and I'm finding a trend, and I'm sure you are too in your shop, that many of the computer failures are due to a lack of battery maintenance or people, their battery dies, they jump it, and they cross the terminals from, positive to negative when they go to jump the car, and they short out the entire computer. We've just had recently a Nissan Titan come in here. It cost the guy $1,800 for the diagnostics, for the change of the computer, and the reprogramming of that computer, because someone at some point, and whether the person would admit to it or not, probably crossed the battery terminal or went to jump the thing because it had a bad battery, because we did end up changing the battery in the thing. He probably went to jump it and put the terminals on the wrong side, and it shorted out the battery.
Yeah.
And
Lucky didn't blow
and
up in
I'm
his
sorry,
face.
shorted out his computer, which made the truck undrivable. He says it started. He got it to start, and after he did something, it wouldn't start anymore. And again, having amateurs who don't know what they're doing working on vehicles, and we get vehicles in here that have been sometimes to 2 or 3 other shops, and none of them can get it to run. It finally gets to us, and they have screwed up so many things on the vehicle. Yeah. We understand perfectly why the vehicle didn't run, and went to the next shop, and they couldn't get it to run in the next shop because no one has the knowledge and the capability and the tools that they need to properly diagnose these things and find out where the problem is.
Right. Well, and all of those things you just said, Glenn, it's very important that the people out there listening, that you take care of your vehicle, because right now, who knows what's going to happen with vehicles? I mean, and you can still buy. There's Toyota, there's Honda, there's a lot of other cars out there that probably aren't going to be maybe as affected by it. But there's some statistics I want to throw out there real quick. 2022, Stellantis made $16.79 billion. Ford in 2022 made $17.93 billion. And GM in 22 made $14.5 billion. So that just tells you that car manufacturers have made a lot of money. And
that's a lot of cash, brother.
Yeah, and they, after COVID, cars were scarce. They were selling them for a lot more. Yes, they did have the chip problem, and a lot of them sat for a long period of time. And I'm not sure, there's some vehicles that they made in 2021 that they were sitting, last time I remember, they were sitting at some kind of a arena or something. There was a huge facility where they had a bunch of trucks out there they didn't have chips for. So I don't know what they're going to do with them, if they've sold them all, or if they're going to have to do something with them, because if 2023 and you're buying a 2021, I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know.
Well, it's going to drastically affect what the consumer would have to pay for the thing in terms of paying a much lesser price. But, at what point do these manufacturers say, well, we can't afford to sell them that cheap?
Right.
I don't know.
Well, and it's exactly. But this strike, I think, it could be, there could be some serious ramifications.
Yes, absolutely.
Of what's going to happen, and it all falls on the consumer. That's the cruddy part, and the consumer is just trying to get through life, and man, buying a car, and they're selling cars now for what my first house didn't cost as much as that car cost.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, and so. It's just inflation. I guess overall, everything has gotten to be more expensive, and obviously
hamburgers $10-12 now.
Well, and people want, and just like the UAW, man, they want benefits. They want to have some security, stability. They've got families to feed. I understand that, and so the thing of it is we are in a society where today we're short so many workers out there that they can kind of flex their muscles a little bit too.
Right. Well, the technology again has driven up the microchip, necessity out there. There's so much technology at so many levels and so many different kinds of manufacturing. It's not just automobiles. We're talking about children's toys. We're talking about electronic devices of any sort, whether they're computers.
Microwave.
Everything.
Yeah,
Everything's got computer chips in it. So as people become more and more technologically addicted, I guess, and they have to have the latest of everything, these things all demand microchips. And so everyone's vying for them. The manufacturers of automobiles want them. The manufacturers of computers want them, and other, audio technologies, and virtually everything. Lighting fixtures, for goodness sakes, have microchips in them.
You got little miniature computers in just about everything. That's what runs them. It's, all stuff that we use every day that people blender. People don't even realize that.
We're talking about tens of billions of microchips are in demand every year to do all the manufacturing and all the products that they're used in. Yeah. You got a smart refrigerator, smart oven, smart washers and dryers. I mean, the list is endless.
So
Smart
you're-
hot water heaters. I mean,
so-
who needs?
So you're
who
telling
needs
me
to have all that
So
technology?
you're telling me if I put a microchip in my brain, I'll be smart?
It's debatable. Debatable. But, that's something that we don't really think about as just general citizens of the world, that these things are being used in everything. Then they're being used in electric tools. They're being used the list just goes on and on. I could spend the rest of the day talking about all the things that use these chips. But they can only manufacture so many because there's only so many plants and there's only so many employees who are actually doing the work 24/7. My son here works for Microchip locally, and they manufacture, microchips for a variety of different companies who are manufacturers. So they have to manufacture the chips there, and they're working 24/7. I mean, that place is open 24/7, and so are all of the microchip plants all over the world. So
Yeah, and there's probably a lot of robotics in that too. I bet there's probably a lot of robots doing the chips, right?
to a certain degree, but certain things cannot be done. They have to be done by human beings. And so when, and I ask my son, how you doing at work? It's kind of boring. I get bored a lot of times. I'm just kind of doing the same repetitious thing over and over.
Yeah,
and
it's
he's,
manufacturing.
Yeah, and he's a very smart kid, but he's got a good job with decent pay and good benefits and everything else like that. So it kind of hangs in there. But this isn't necessarily his dream job. So a lot of people drop out of those jobs and they go find something else that floats their boat, as we say.
Well, to wrap this thing up, Glenn, that September 14th is approaching pretty fast. I mean, it's already September, and can you believe it already? I mean, this year's flying by. And
that's actually the day after my birthday, Dave. So if you want to wish me a preemptive
happy birthday, Glenn. Happy birthday.
I don't want to be 67, man. This, it's
I just
not
turned
getting
50.
any
I
easier.
just turned 59 August 23rd. But anyway, so I digress. But anyway, so
happy belated birthday, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. And
I did wish you that on Facebook.
Yeah, I think you did.
I did.
Yeah.
I think it was belated, but I didn't find out until
Oh,
I
yeah,
saw.
I think I saw that.
I saw your true friends out there congratulating you for
True friends.
making it another year.
Yeah. Anyway, so with that September 14th approaching pretty fast, if they end up not coming to a deal, I mean, I guess what should the consumer expect?
Well, the trickle-down effect is going to take place not so immediately. Usually it takes a few weeks or months for us to really see the end result, but prices are going to go up again on cars. The shortages are going to take place in the car dealerships, and so again, that trickle-down effect also affected the price of used cars. They went up by like 30 or 40%
a lot.
at some point.
Yeah, and you couldn't even find a good used car. The only ones were out there. I mean, people were pulling stuff out of their backyard and selling it for
exactly
$5,000. It's crazy.
And not only that, but people were again getting into these dirty deals with cars that have been in floods, hurricanes, or whatever, and so again, it's a buyer beware. And please, we're not trying to criticize anybody here. We're trying to be a consumer advocate and say, watch out. Make sure that you have a vehicle thoroughly inspected by a quality shop that knows how to look for the telltale signs of something that's been in a flood or a hurricane or whatever. Because when you buy it, the symptoms may not be there, but down the road, that salt water that gets in there will start corroding the terminals of your computer and leave you stranded.
Yeah, and Glenn, and one thing I got to say is, and then we'll wrap this thing up here, is that I've never worked in a manufacturing plant before, but once they shut it down and everybody goes on strike, firing that thing back up, I don't think is just a matter of flipping a switch. I think it takes days,
You're
probably
correct.
days to to get everything back up and running again. So even if they're down for 10 days, let's say, they're going to lose a lot of money, number one. But number two, you're down for 10 days. How long is it going to take them to fire the thing back up and get production back up to where it was before they shut it down?
Yeah, it could set them back. It could set them back 30, 40 days in reality.
Who knows,
by the time they try to play catch up with the days in the manufacturing that was missed.
Well, I just hope that they work it out. I hope that the UAW and the auto manufacturers, they work out a deal and get it handled and keep this thing from going into tailspin, and because in the end the consumer loses.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to be fear mongers or anything, but just reality. It's a reality check for all of us because we all drive cars. We all are subjected to having to have our cars serviced and so on. And so things are going to change. The supply chain definitely is going to be affected because not all of those parts that are being manufactured are going to new cars. They're made for repairs on cars that, were manufactured 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so the supply chain, as it becomes shorted, the prices will go up on those parts again. And the problem is, Dave, you and I have to deal with the aftermath of customers coming and saying, well,
Why
I
is
just
it so
had that thing
expensive?
replaced and it was only half that price.
Oh,
You
yeah.
guys are ripping me off.
Yeah.
No, it's costing us a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah.
And if we don't stay profitable, the good shops that are out there are going to vanish as well. So
Yeah.
we're going to keep it all in mind. Audience, we're not trying to blow your mind and make your head explode. But these are the realities that Dave and I and other shop owners across the country have to deal with. So we thank you again for your time today on the podcast, Under the Hood with Glen and Dave. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them at podcastunderthehood.com. And we appreciate your time.